The default state of a human mind is chaotic. We carry self-deception, comparison, judgment, doubt, and chaos. Before a chaotic mind creates chaos in work, relationships, or health, it first builds up inside you as tension, doubt, distraction, emotional turbulence, and identity friction. The internal architecture is what creates internal friction. That internal friction is what triggers every outward problems. I don't want to brainwash you with chaos as bad. If you always chase structure, you will inevitably drown into chaos because life isn't symmetrical. It's asymmetric, it's dynamic, it's chaotic. The fundamental idea is that growth is to build order from chaos. Chaos and clarity, chaos and order are like yin and yang. If there's no chaos, there's no clarity. Chaos is what creates order. Chaos is responsible for us turning from apes to humans who can think, learn, drive, create, and evolve faster than any species. Chaos created pressure. Pressure shaped thinking. Thinking led to innovation. Innovation accelerated cultural evolution. Cultural evolution built civilizations. Civilizations reshaped humanity. Humanity feeds innovation back into the system. Each repetition of this chaos thinking innovation, chaos thinking innovation, chaos thinking innovation increased the speed of human adaptation. Just as chaos shaped cultural evolution, it governs every complex system we live in today, from molecules to languages to societies to how nature maintains ecological balance. The more a system is far from equilibrium, unstable, dynamic, and messy, the more potential it has to reorganize into something novel. When I say systems, I am referring to complex systems like body, brain, or ecosystem, etc. Every complex system hits a peak of chaos. At that peak, it has the potential to go to multiple directions. That means chaos creates opportunity for newer order. Molecules interacting chaotically can self-organize into highly structured patterns like oscillating chemical waves or crystallized formations. Neurons fire on patterns that seem chaotic and random, but these chaotic firing allow learning, adaptation, and memory formation. The forest fires seem destructive, but it's the nature's way to maintain balance. Harsh conditions forced humans from leaf shelters to mud huts to wooden houses to stone castles, and now to concrete buildings. Language and cultures themselves emerged from cues. Random sounds, gestures, and symbols formed a structured network of communication. Chaos creates structure. The mental chaos, from self doubt to uncertainty to fear to doubt to confusion, can become the raw material for clarity and transformation. When your brain is far from equilibrium, it becomes open to multiple directions. Either it can continue towards more chaos or build new order. Chaos is a prerequisite to clarity. Mental chaos are like cache files in our phones. It builds up automatically. Humans learned and evolved through these cache mental files. Comparison started as an evolutionary tool to learn, imitate, and adapt. Doubt began as a useful signal to make survival decisions. Inherited beliefs allowed knowledge to survive across generations. These mechanisms accelerated human evolution. But as we got pushed into a hyper-connected world where survival isn't a primary concern, these same mechanisms lose their original function. As a result, the survival and evolutionary mechanisms now became defense mechanisms. Fear became self-deception, comparison became toxic competition, and as a result, instead of becoming more complex and complex and complex through chaos, a lot are stuck in chaos. Self-deception is a defense mechanism. The conscious mind suppresses or rationalizes away the facts that threaten its identity or beliefs. Self-deception is the act of lying to oneself, but doing it so convincingly that you start believing your own lie. Instead of accepting the failure, you begin saying the world isn't fair. Instead of accepting you can't focus, you begin saying there's a lot of noise. Instead of accepting that you're addicted to the validation from social media, you label it as some sort of normal behavior. You simply rationalize. You simply rationalize. Rationalization is elegant self-deception from which you turn uncomfortable truths you don't want to accept into logical sounding excuses. We are all living in a filter, regardless of our age, geography, or lifestyle, and these filters are formed by our beliefs and upbringing. If you believe people are inherently bad, you'll notice the anger, you'll notice the frustration, you'll notice the uneasiness in people's eyes. But you'll dismiss the good behavior from the shopkeeper, a hello from a security guard, or a smile from your mom. The filter and beliefs are interconnected. The belief feeds the filter strengthens the belief. Self deception gives a temporary relief from reality as it guards our identity. It's a painkiller in the short term, but it's more like a cancer cell in the long term because it just breaks the foundation of growth. Every lie you tell yourself adds fog to the mirror of self awareness. Every truth you face, no matter how painful it is, clears it. And behind the scenes, comparison intensifies this fog. For early humans, comparison was a way to learn. Comparison was how they learned. If a man saw someone hunt better, run faster, or climb faster, he tried to imitate that to learn to survive better. Comparison was survival intelligence, and this got coded into our neural wiring. But the point is, now we are not just comparing to 10 people in our tribe. We are comparing to the richest, to the fittest, to the smartest, to the most beautiful, to the most calmest, to the most charismatic, and so on. It's an overload. You're living in two timelines, yours and someone else's. It distorts your sense of self because you begin forming a complex solution of desires of like who you want to be. And you eventually drown into confusion because the solution you have formed is too complex. It's too much like a fantasy. Comparison used to direct us to what was possible. Now it hits with what's missing. So, the sweet dishes. Our minds are chaotic by default. It's when we put in the conscious effort to regain clarity, to build order, the chaos slowly dissolves. Internal chaos is not a personal flaw, but a systemic side effect, a survival oriented brain flooded by information, comparison, and self generated narratives. Human brains are running primal softwares in a hyper stimulated world. Chaos has always existed. Disorder is the default state of reality. The progression from chaos to order is what we call cultural evolution in the macro scale and innovation in the micro scale. The second law of thermodynamics says that in any natural process, the amount of entropy, that's disorder, increases over time unless energy is invested continuously to maintain order. That means everything in the universe naturally moves towards disorder. Order has to be bought consciously. Order is to be paid for with attention, with energy, with effort and structure. Civilizations are temporary victories over entropy. So is the mind. The point of growth is to move from chaos to order. Learning language is a progression from chaos to order. Learning a skill is a progression from chaos to order. If you begin learning a guitar, that's essentially turning chaos into order. First off, you begin with the basic chords like A minor, B major, D minor, etc. Then you learn to strum. Then you combine the chords and strum. Then you add lyrics into it. And eventually you get a whole song out of it. You start off with dissected parts, chords, strums, lyrics, and turn it into a song. And now you can sing a song. That progression from chaos to order is a high resistance path. Chaos is necessary, but mental chaos, self doubt, comparison, judgment, fears, or inherited beliefs that don't serve you, strips away clarity. You don't hold one stable identity. You switch between multiple identities based on your most recent comparison, doubt, fear, or insecurity. A confused man is the one not sure of who he is. And that's why a confused person, because he or she is unsure of who they are, becomes unstable. The instability of identity makes them restless. That's why people chase trends in clothing, in behavior, in action, in words. They chase trends. They chase trends to distract themselves from the inner chaos. Trends dictate most people's lives. Most people outsource thinking to trends. When you lose the plot of your own story, you borrow someone else's. And in this borrowing, you keep on jumping from one belief to another, one story to another, one extreme to another. This constant switching of your beliefs, actions, and your subjective truth is what leads to identity crisis. Identity crisis is the collapse of meaning. The self exists as a pattern of order, memories, values, and goals that keep entropy in check. When chaos invades, the pattern destabilizes. That's why identity crisis feels existential, because you're aware enough to observe the destabilization, but not stable enough to reconstruct order. Identity crisis is psychological entropy. The mind loses structural integrity, that's meaning, direction, and self trust. And the tragedy is, mental chaos doesn't directly correlate to your external success or physical success in any area of your life. That's why you can find rich but judgmental, fit but insecure, wealthy but ethikless people. You need to build coherence between truth and belief in action. Inner work isn't luxury, it's maintenance for the mind's architecture. Like any structure that stands against chaos, the human mind needs foundational principles in order to build and maintain clarity in chaos. A building is built by foundational principles of architecture, and so is the mind built by foundational cognitive principles. Understanding cues is the theory, but the principles I'm about to discuss are the architecture. The three cognitive principles I'm about to discuss are metacognition, mental hygiene, and information fasting. Cumulatively, they form the architecture of inner order. They are the cement, bricks, and stones of the building that you're about to make, of the building called order. So, firstly, metacognition. The word meta comes from the Greek prefix meaning beyond, above, or about itself. The word cognition comes from the Latin cognoscere, meaning to know. It refers to every mental process involved in acquiring and using knowledge, thinking, perceiving, remembering, judging, or deciding. When you attach meta to something, you're referring to that thing turned inwards, an awareness of itself. So, metaphysics is beyond physics, metadata is data about data, metacognition is thinking about thinking. Metacognition is the awareness of your internal mental activity. It's the ability to observe thoughts without distortion. That's when you start seeing your cognitive errors, your assumptions, your judgments, and your impulsive reactions as signals to improve. You begin forming a sense of trust with yourself because you're becoming more honest and honest with yourself due to observation. Honesty is what gives you strength. Knowing when you're wrong gives you the awareness to improve. Knowing when you're right gives you the strength to stand your ground. Without metacognition, we become our thoughts. We confuse emotion with truth. We mistake our biases for clarity. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, connecting to metacognition. As Buddha taught, sati, that's mindfulness, the art of watching your mind without being carried away by it. That's connecting to metacognition. Lord Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, for the one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for the one who has failed to do so, the mind will be the greatest enemy. That's Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, verse 6. To conquer the mind doesn't mean to suppress your thoughts or eliminate your thoughts, emotions. It means to become aware of them. Lord Krishna is describing the same principle that the modern psychology calls meta-awareness or metacognition, the ability to observe your own cognitive processes without being ruled by them. Metacognition is the walkway between ignorance and wisdom. It's not a one-day awakening, it's a practice. It's a practice of observing your thoughts, observe your anger, fear, desires, sadness, happiness, urges, and all that you think and feel. It may sound spiritual, but it's deeply existential. That doesn't mean that once you observe yourself, observe your own cognitive processes, you'll become some sort of monk You'll have no urges. You can just sit on the top of the mountain for days. That's not the point. The point of meta awareness, meta cognition, thinking about thinking, is to see the truth. When you observe your internal biases, rationalizations, justifications, judgments, reactions, and ignorance, you slowly begin to see that your life is running on autopilot. Reactive, impulsive, prone to illusions and urges. A simple anecdote would be, if you know what the ingredients in the fast food does to your body and you truly care about your health, you will eventually resist eating that. That's exactly why Steve Jobs didn't give his children iPads, because he knew what it does to the brain. The architects of distraction understand its gravity better than its consumers. Become the architect. Observe your mind. Think about thinking. Develop metacognition. Secondly, mental hygiene. This one's pretty straightforward. Mental hygiene is to the mind what physical hygiene is to the body. If people do not shower, their body will smell bad. If people do not clean up their minds will be contaminated. And here's where the statement, the human mind is chaotic by default, makes the most sense. Attention by default is a sponge, not a laser. It's evolved to be alert. The brain always notices. Attention has no built-in filter for what to notice. You have to consciously install one. You have to consciously install a filter, or else external noise, opinions, fears, and half-baked ideologies will shape you before you shape yourself. There's always some degree of absorption we need. The greatest philosophers absorbed everything until they became capable to construct a worldview. In fact, noise is what gave them clarity. Marcus Aurelius wouldn't have had written Meditations if there was no noise. Philosophies wouldn't emerge if there's no counterforce in this world. Philosophies emerged because people thought and observed about noise enough. Think of Taoism, Stoicism, or Buddhism. Yin completes the yang, feminine completes the masculine, noise completes clarity. Clarity begins when you think. Thinking begins when you observe. The Stoics believed foolishness is the outcome of ignorance. Ignorance isn't evil, it's the default state of our brain. Everything naturally moves towards disorder unless energy is continuously invested in order to maintain order. That's second law of thermodynamics. If you don't cut the grass, weeds will take over. If you don't organize your room, mess will take over. In the same way, if you don't clean your mind, false beliefs, illusions, judgments, and ignorance will take over. A chaotic mind isn't an evil one, it's an unmaintained one. If I had to define what a maintained mind looks like, I would say a maintained mind is humble enough to question itself, strong enough to stand on its values and beliefs, and alive enough to evolve. You need to maintain your mind. And it's pretty similar to maintaining your body. Like you cut junk food, if you want to build a better health, you need to cut off the mental equivalent of junk food or fast food to build a better mind, to build a cleaner mind, to build a fitter mind. First of all, filter your inputs. This is the foundation. Mental hygiene starts with what you feed your mind with. If you feed garbage, your mind will become one. If you consciously choose hygiene, your mind will become one. Find the mental equivalents of fast food in your life. Social media, gossips, unnecessary contacts, or valueless content consumption are ultra processed mental foods, addictive and stimulating, but nutritionally empty. As Thoreau said, most people need not more content but fewer contaminants. Secondly, value rest. Marcus Aurelius writes in his book Meditations that rest is the highest use of time. The Stoics believed that hustle is inefficiency, that's stupidity. Their philosophy is that stillness is what keeps you from being tossed away by passions. Even modern thinkers like Cal Newport suggest the same. There's a really interesting topic I was reading in this book, Deep Work, which was titled as Be Lazy. Idleness is not a vacation, an indulgence, or a vice. It is as indispensable to the brain as vitamin D is to the body, and deprived of it, we suffer a mental affliction as disfiguring as rickets. Downtime, is paradoxically necessary to getting any work done. Deep work needs the support of a mind regularly released to leisure. People confuse stimulation with rest, but true rest is when you are not consuming anything. No music, no content, no passive scrolling, no messaging. Scrolling social feeds just give you an illusion of rest whilst leading to mental fatigue. Mental fatigue leads to impulsivity and poor decisions. True rest is the low input time when the mind gets space to breathe. Rest is maintenance. Rest is the pause that maintains order and cues. The last principle, information fasting. Information fasting is intellectual minimalism, the art of becoming rich with knowledge without becoming mentally obese. It's not anti information, it's anti or information, which is a strategic and chosen reduction to restore mental bandwidth and order. Lao Tzu want the more knowledge, the more confusion. The point Lao Tzu is making is that the more opinions you collect without reflecting, the farther you drift from wisdom. When you are busy in accumulating information through reading, content consumption, or any other source of information, you are essentially acting like a hard drive. Information is infinite. 8 billion people, 8 billion viewpoints, possibly more. True knowledge lies in the ability to synthesize information across domains. There's a difference between someone who knows facts and someone who is a great synthesizer or someone who is a great thinker. A great thinker is very good at synthesizing knowledge. Don't accumulate information, synthesize it. Because accumulation makes you a container, synthesis makes you a creator. A true creator can synthesize physics, evolution, psychology, philosophy, religion, and more. Studying information leads to information overload. Study fundamental principles. From principles, we derive models and frameworks. From models, we generate information and facts. From facts, people form opinions. When you start with opinions, you inherit bias. When you start with principles, you see clearly. You need to have few but trusted sources of information. Don't overload yourself with multiple voices just to get confused. Everyone is speaking from the same fundamental principle, just in their voice. Choose your source of information. Choose what resonates the most with you. The new metric of IQ is the ability to selectively choose the most effective information. Consume depth, consume big ideas, consume books, consume philosophies, consume principles. Study people who construct crossroads across multiple domains. That's true information. So, to synthesize everything, metacognition helps you witness clarity, mental hygiene helps you maintain clarity, information fasting helps you handle clarity. These aren't hacks, to-dos, or tips. These are how you maintain order and consciousness. As Mihai Csikszentmihalyi said in his book, Flow, the optimal state of inner experience is one in which there is order and consciousness. Everything automatically moves towards disorder if no energy is invested into it. If you don't exercise, your body will move towards disorder. If you don't maintain your mind, if you don't exercise your mind will move towards disorder, disorganization. Entropy. Mental entropy is the silent default of human existence. Every time you try to create clarity, to focus, to make sense, to hold attention, you're fighting entropy. That's why thinking deeply, making decisions, or staying mindful feels like effort, because you're essentially turning chaos into order. Order gives clarity. Clarity gives understanding. Understanding gives reliability. Reliability strengthens identity. And identity feeds back order and consciousness. This cycle actually mirrors the self organization of nature, like galaxies or biological systems, where under conscious energy input, small pockets of order emerge and compound into more complex systems. This is how cells turn into multicellular organisms, then tissues, then to organs, then to organisms, and finally led to ecosystems. The same rule governs mind and matter. Like waves in the ocean, chaos is the natural current of the human existence. Order doesn't appear magically, it's engineered. Clarity doesn't happen by luck. It's the structure you build within your own mind to resist the pull of entropy. When you practice metacognition, information fasting, mental hygiene, you're not just thinking better, you're sculpturing consciousness itself. Build awareness, maintain it. That's order. Rahul, signing off.